Today's episode is brought to you by the Reese Hotel in Queenstown. Now is the time to book your 5-star hotel stay at the Reese Hotel in Queenstown, proudly New Zealand owned and operated. With stunning lake and mountain views, courtesy town shuttles, a private beach and jetty access, and staff that'll blow your socks off with their impeccable service, it's definitely not your average weekend getaway. Guests can experience the talents of Chef Corey Hume at True South Dining Room for some exquisite locally sourced produce, or their lobby bar with the award-winning wine cellar bursting with local and international vintages, or simply work your way through their cocktail list. Perhaps if the mood strikes, break out the in-house Bentley Continental for a quick lakeside spin, or an airport pickup with a difference. The video you're seeing now, I took over the weekend with my stay up there. This is the view from one of their balconies. While all the rooms come with balconies and heaps of space to enjoy these views, now is the time to book your weekend getaway with a special discounted price. Book now via the hotel website. That's the Reese, THEREES.co.nz. Use the promo code COVID-19, one word, to receive a special offer of 10% off any accommodation. That's thereese.co.nz and use the promo code COVID-19 for your getaway.
The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittenden. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
Now, look, before we start, we better make sure that we get this right, because I sat down and had a chat with you the other day, and I was wearing a cap, and you asked me, was it no New York? Is that
no Yankees. I'm a Red Sox fan, so
Red Sox. Yeah. Okay, I don't have a Red Sox cap because you're originally from Maine, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was looking for people who don't know. I love the intrigue around this part of America, because it's like, are you Canadian or are you American? It's right there up in the corner of Vermont, Nova Scotia right beside, Montreal right beside, Quebec City very close, Ottawa. I mean, I say very close. It's probably still a 20-hour drive because America is.
It's not quite 20, but it's getting
so
9, 10.
So for people who don't know, that's up in that corner. New York's right here. Is being from Maine and hating New York kind of like being from Hamilton and hating Auckland? They are kind of your nearest neighbor, but kind of stick it in your ear hole. We hate you anyway, sort of thing.
Yeah, a little bit more. I mean, probably being from Maine, hating people from Massachusetts is a bit more like that in Boston. But then again, you got the Boston sports. And I mean, Boston and the Red Sox and Yankees just have a big rivalry. That's kind of Australia, like New Zealand kind of rivalry type thing, But yeah.
So because I always like to set up my conversations with no barricades, I've got some options here. I've got the Pittsburgh hat on at the moment, but we can go we can go the West Coast with Los Angeles or San Fran, Baltimore, Orioles, Diamondback, Arizona Diamondbacks.
Oh yeah.
Tampa Bay. Or we can go Houston, or we can go Chicago, or we can go. I'm wearing Pittsburgh. This isn't all my caps. I'm a little bit addicted to caps. Because I understand rivalries in sport, and I don't want to put up an impedance to this conversation.
No. Yeah, just stick with the Pittsburgh. That's fine. Yeah.
I did think Pittsburgh because I was thinking about Pittsburgh's just over here, so it's it's not your local team, but there's Maine, and
it's far enough away that we don't care as much. But yeah, just as long as it's not Yankees, really.
America is terrifying, eh? I mean, like I'm for lots of reasons, but I'm talking purely size at the moment, and we don't get it. Like we look at like his Maine up here again for people who are watching. It looks like it is right next door to Quebec City, but what is that? Is that a several-hour drive to get from Quebec to where you were in Maine?
Oh, you're the one on Google. I mean, it's like 5 hours, 8 hours. Yeah. I mean,
so that's like Auckland to Wellington, or it's like now, and it looks like it's right there because of purely the vastness of the country.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's America's all these different little cultures, really. I mean, you say, oh, you're from America, I mean, what does that even mean? It's huge that, the the North and the South is really different. I mean, I left when I was 19, so I traveled a little bit, but I've been living in New Zealand since I was 19. So I've lived my whole adult life in New Zealand. So there's still some things I haven't really experienced, but my brother did move to South Carolina, and it's just a different culture down there. We went down there, and he was telling us, and we didn't really believe it. You go in the grocery store, and like, you know, the guys there at the deli counter, you know, how y'all doing, and having this big long conversation, and we're like, yeah, that's good, but just give us our meat. We want to get out of here. We're from, you know. And then I go up to Boston, you know, and you're in this food court, and the guy's like, oh, what do you want, some pizza? What do you want? You know, on a Coke, you know, come on, who's next? And I'm like, oh, it's good to be home.
How often do you get back to the States? I mean, obviously the last couple of years, zero, but previous to that, what's the rotation back home?
Oh, I mean, when so I'm married to a Kiwi, been here, you know, since 2002. It was every kind of year and a half, every 2 years for a while. Then we got kids. Then it kind of turned into my parents coming out every year, every you know, 18 months. But we had we went in 2015 for Christmas, and then we had been planning a big 3-month trip to the States. And it was meant to be, we had tickets booked June 5th, 2020.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. So it's, oh man, it's still a bit of a sore spot for us because we had been looking for, we had fundraising, we got 4 kids and talking to our kids, and it had been, you know, 4.5 year get, and now it's going to be, you know, who knows? Yeah.
Are you one of those people who still has like $4,000 sitting on an airplane's credit line somewhere?
No, actually, because the law was if you book through America, you could get the money back. So I literally emailed Air New Zealand, and I was like, hey, I'm looking into getting a refund, you know, for this. And this was months after, because, you know, it was about 6 months after we had meant to go. And literally the next day, the money was back in my bank account.
Wow.
$8.5 grand.
I was May of 2020. So, you know, 2 months after the lockdown started, it was my father's 80th birthday. So we have still $800 split between Air New Zealand and Jetstar of flights for me and all the kids to get from Dunedin to Auckland to back again. And I've just heard, and this is not official information, but if people are watching or listening to this, maybe if you've got a credit, you should check. My sister called me the other day and she said, oh, my credit on Air New Zealand's about to expire. And so she's booking a flight to come down and say good day and, you know, check out Otago. But so I'm going to have a look at, for those of us who have had those credits sitting there for 18 months, a couple of years, they might have to either be used or lost. And I mean, as much as I love Air New Zealand and want to support, you know, our national carrier, I don't want to just hand them $600 or $700 like it's nothing.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I was worried about, because I was like, yeah, like it literally was $8.5 grand. And I was like, at first they said you got a year to spend. I'm like, man, how many times I got to go to Queenstown?
Yeah.
8.5 grand, you know, like, yeah.
No, good. Hey, but look, thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming in and having a bit of a chat. I mean, for people who don't know you,
which is probably a lot.
Well, I was going to say you are a comedian, but when I knew you, let's say 10, 15 years ago, you were a comedian. Yes. Is it something that you've moved a bit away from and got on with other parts of life? Or is it something that you have continued? There's more news around you and comedy that we'll get to. But that part of your life, like you were an award-winning comedian, you're winning awards for up-and-comers and new beginners and all that kind of stuff. So the last 10 years of your life, has that been something that's stuck around?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but yeah, I was going well until about mid-2010. And then it's kind of hard to describe, but I guess I had a health crash would probably be the thing. I was diagnosed with arthritis in my spine, but I had a lot of chronic fatigue and chronic pain, which actually lasted 7 years. So I had to step away. I had to step away from all work. And you know, that was very hard. So, comedy then became, you know, not really a part of my life, because I couldn't do it. And to be honest, I didn't, it was hard. I kind of stepped away from the scene a lot because there was a bit of grief around that, you know. That if I couldn't do it, I kind of didn't want to be around it a lot of times, you know. So we had kids. We have 4 kids now, so it was kind of survival for a while. Then my health improved, and I got back into some work, but not comedy right away. And then I did this crazy thing where we've moved down to Whanganui. So I was in Auckland, based in Auckland, and then we moved down just, for different reasons, but we got a young family and we wanted to shift out of Auckland, and we came to, Whanganui. And then I thought, oh, living in Whanganui in the middle of a global pandemic, why don't I kind of restart my comedy career? Which is, a bit of a odd decision to make. So for me at this point, it's gone from like I'm still struggling with some health stuff. So I'm like, hey, if I'm going to be struggling, why not try and do what I love to do? So it's gone from let's give it a go as a hobby. And now it's kind of like, oh, it's kind of possible to do some stuff. So let's just keep going and just see how far we can take this thing. Yeah.
Did you find something within the lockdown? I mean, there are some, probably more international artists because they're the ones we hear about. Did you find a niche within that lockdown like some people did? Like, I know he didn't do it during lockdown, but, for people who don't know, we can bring up his Instagram and have a look if you want. But Kyle Dunnigan is an American comedian who has found this niche on Instagram where all of his Instagram is geniusly funny. And he's moved away from being he was doing a little bit of acting, and he was comedy writing for sitcoms in America, and he found that niche of online content, and he got discovered, I guess you'd say, but certainly blown up by Joe Rogan. But it was really, it seems like within lockdown, because he was putting out sort of all this content on his Instagram, which you don't have to go anywhere for, he blew up even more. Did you find a little something in there, or were you just starting to get back into what you kind of would, the stand up in front of a crowd, into a mic, need a group to do what you want to do?
Yeah. I would love to explore a little bit more around the online sort of thing. I didn't get into the niche because I have 4 kids, and I was just trying to survive through lockdown, to be honest. But that's definitely something I want to explore. But my first love is live stand up. That's what I love to do. I love to be in front of a crowd. And so it's, yeah. And when you're in that environment, that give and take feedback is just so good that online, I struggle to know if things would hit as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting to see where people go. But people, I just mentioned Kyle Dunnigan. I don't know if you know of him very much, but here, this is what he does. This is his Instagram feed. He became quite famous for doing Caitlyn Jenner and the, and the children, and doing face swaps and all of the voices.
Oh, hey.
Let's watch a movie at the same time while we're FaceTiming.
He's very, very funny. He does a great Joe Biden, and he does a whole series where he takes off the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
My uraniums, our nation's in crisis. Joe Rogan has just said the N-word to speak. No one's watching it.
He's very funny.
And I've just been informed. The president's
there's been so many things that have changed in the last 10 years. So if you look, I stepped away from comedy in 2011 and then got back into it last year. And there are so many things that have changed in comedy in that 10 years, including the online stuff. There was a bit of online stuff, but really not to any extent. And even the pathway to comedy, because the pathway to comedy, especially in New Zealand, it was, you do open mics, you get on gigs, you do, and then eventually maybe you move on to the TV and the TV writing. And again, that was all emerging kind of 2010, all that time. But now you have people who get famous, online, and then they do these online comedy, and then they come and do live stand up as well. And a lot of us kind of more, I don't want to come up with some old school, but they're like, wait, you haven't earned this, or you haven't gone through, it's just a different pathway. And there's nothing wrong with it, obviously, but we're kind of like, hey, this there's different pathways now, and it's all sort of changing. Yeah.
It's interesting watching that internationally as well. I think even though Ricky Gervais is obviously pretty successful at most of the stuff he does, love him or hate him, he did that because he became famous in television and then started stand up. And I've heard him talk about why he did it. And he said something like, my paraphrase, There's a like an hour-long program called something like Talking Comedy, where him and Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock and Louis C.K. they're all sitting down. There might be another one of theirs. They're all sitting down just talking comedy.
Yeah,
and they talk about the art of comedy. And I'm pretty sure in that he says something like he kind of felt like he had to, because that was he felt like what he had earned. There was something else he had to also incorporate in there because of what he'd done. And I also was thinking, I'm trying to get I won't be able to, but I'm trying to get a podcast with Steve-O at the moment from Jackass, because they've got their movies coming out at the moment. And he is a bit similar. He obviously went all through that television program, movie series, alcohol addiction, coming out the other end, and then started doing comedy up on stage. So it's really interesting to see today how people are sometimes getting there through other sources, as opposed to, like you say, the open mic, the having the 4 spot, the 3 spot, the 2 spot, the feature act, the touring. I guess it shows. I mean, it's probably a bit like me in radio. When I got into radio, everyone else was coming in with communications degrees, and I kind of went the side door and had an opportunity, and someone saw something in me and got in. So probably most people who are getting into radio at that stage was like, how the heck did you do this? That you've gone the wrong way about it. And it worked for 15 years, 20 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no one pathway. I mean, what I love about stand up, and what I loved I started 2002, and it was a cool time to start comedy in New Zealand around then, because you weren't the pioneers. The classic was already going, and there was already some stuff happening. So you weren't really doing the hard work, but you were kind of part of the second wave where this was before 7 days, and before I find now I meet a lot of people now, a lot of people want to be comedians and think they can become comedians in New Zealand, which is great. But when we started, there was only a handful of us that kind of thought we could do it, and we were all just like, oh, let's give it a go. We have no clue how there's any kind of career pathway in this. But there is no degree in stand up. There's more workshops now. But it's just, you get up and do it. And also you got to learn on stage, which is quite painful as well. There are things you can obviously do off stage, writing, rehearsing, blah, blah, blah. But also you just need to grind it out, because Seinfeld talks about the open mics is a sweaty gym of comedy. That's where you go to work out and work, build your muscles. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to the idea about you stepping away for 10 years, because like you've already started to sort of hint at, as there's been changes. It feels like the last maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's been even more changes. There's quite a big groundswell coming through of what comedians can and can't say now. It does seem to be sort of more of an international issue than a New Zealand issue. Although, I like comedy. I have a lot of comedians on. I follow it pretty closely, and I haven't really heard any controversies in New Zealand about, comedian X saying YZ or talking to ABC person and it being an issue. Maybe there's been some smaller. It all seems to be what's happening internationally, though. Do you come back into this genre, come back into this art form thinking, the changes that are afoot are for the better, are for the worse, or they're just changes and they're neutral? Do you have any concerns about that sort of thing?
Just coming back into it and observing, and for one sense, I have no concerns around myself and my own comedy. I have always worked clean, and that's just been a choice. Like Seinfeld talks about, every comedian's on their own journey. Seinfeld will work clean as a comedian, but you'll hear interviews and he might swear or whatever, which is quite funny. But that's the way he works. So in terms of the cancel culture, like, I'm not worried about being canceled. I don't have much to be canceled from, anyways. To be honest, I know there's all been this Joe Rogan sort of stuff, but I have a wife, I have 4 kids, I've got work, I've got comedy. I'm not really putting a lot of energy into that discussion. I'm just doing what I do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. And look, if people want to know a bit more about, and we were just talking about that. I thought it was called Talking Comedy. I just looked it up while you were talking to make sure. It's called Talking Funny.
Oh, that's right. It's quite a good one. Yeah, I can't.
and this is these guys. Like I think it might be Ricky Gervais produced because he's sort of, you know, there's Chris Rock in there, so there are 4 of them. And
Yeah.
I want to watch this back because just of the local of the last few conversations we've been having, they talk about using the N-word in this.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
And they use the N-word, both Chris Rock and Louis C.K.
Yeah.
And just with the conversations going on of recent days, more so than anything, I want to go back and have a look at this and see what the what the vibe is. I thought I could see a shot with all 4 of them. Where is it? Come on.
Yeah, no, I watched that years ago. I remember it being quite good, and it's just funny to see those 4 in a room because comedically they're all very different, you know, and you might be already kind of, you know, if people thought they wouldn't ever hang out, you know, but they've got comedy in common, you know, which is really interesting. Yeah.
It is funny, isn't it? I thought this the other day. It's a bit of a tangent here about when you're sitting in a room and you look around and you go, I would never fucking be with these people for any reason unless it was for position X. Yeah. And like I grew up in the church, and I find that within church groups, you look around and you see the 80-year-old man and the 17-year-old teenage girl with 2 of her friends, and the married couple with 3 small kids, all in the same room, hanging out doing something. You're like, what would ever bring these people together? I belong to a business group here in Dunnigan where we get together every week and kind of share contacts and that sort of thing. And we had a poker night on Friday night, and I was looking around, and there was, you know, a couple in there, I'm guessing 60s, and there was, you know, an English guy who was like an IT specialist, and all these people. And I did the same sort of thing. I'm like, it's so funny when something external brings together a group of people that on any other day there would be no reason for them to come together, and it works. It kind of goes to show that this tribal community that we're kind of leaning into at the moment is probably quite unhealthy and false, because it works. It works having different positions and people and opinions and people from different groups and, you know, areas come together, even though if you took a photo of that group and go, how do they know each other? Most people would go, I don't know. Are they some weird family? Because that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I love it. And we've actually lived in different communities, you know, where there's very, very diverse people, and it's good for comedy's sake too. It's quite fun, but it's awesome to see people different coming together, and that's been even my involvement in the comedy world. I live a different lifestyle probably to a lot of the comedians. I did grow up in the church world. I actually worked as a pastor while I was doing stand-up comedy. But when we all got together in the room, it didn't matter, you know. It was awesome. Yeah.
So there's a new, this has just sparked off. I mean, this is what we just kind of chat and what comes out. There's a new radio station about to start in New Zealand called Today FM. And I know several people who work at MediaWorks, and, you know, everyone talks, and I know what they're going to try and do with this radio station. And it kind of relates to what we're talking about. I'm not going to play the advert because it'll probably get us pulled, but there's an advert for TV2, which is a Danish television network, right? And I'm going to leave it on silent so we don't get pulled. Hopefully I won't get knocked off YouTube for this. But the advert is all these different groups of people. You can see there's the muscle-bound dudes. You know, there are the, on the left there are the, well, there you go. So it's all different groups of people. There's the old men, and there's the teenage, look, there's the ones wearing their active wear, and then all these groups of people together who look like they're separate groups of people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what they do in this advert, and people should go look it up. Look up TV2 Danish advert. As an announcer comes out, and I'll read it out. But he says, I'm going to ask you some questions, right? And for people who are listening, these people are all compartmentalized within white lines. So there looks like there is an Indian community there, and beside the Indian community, there is people in activewear, the gym goers, and, you know, on the other side of the room, in their own little box, are the teenage kids all dressed like hooligans, and then there's another box with all the muscle-bound gym rats and all this kind of stuff, right? And he goes, some of them might be a bit personal. And it goes on, like, obviously people are looking uncomfortable. He says, but I hope you'll answer them honestly. And then the first question is, who in this room was the class clown? And of course, all the room kind of starts laughing. And what happens is someone from the gangsters comes out, someone from the elderly comes out, someone from the teenage group comes out, someone. And what it does very cleverly is, even though we're compartmentalized, and for those that are watching will see this, for those that are listening won't, there is now a picture up on screen of, what would you say, 12, 15 people there?
Yeah.
Who, again, you'd look at that photo and go, how do they connect? And you have no idea. And it's because they were all class clowns. They were seen as class clown.
And one of them's wearing a Red Sox hat, just by the way.
Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah, in the back there. And this radio station, Today FM, that's about to start up, I know that this is part of the inspiration of what their marketing is going to be. I know that because people who work at MediaWorks, it's kind of been talked about publicly. And so this new radio station is going to try and do exactly what we're talking about, which is bringing people together, even if they're from different tribes. And I don't know if it's going to work or not. People are thinking this new talk station is going to be like a competitor to ZB. I think the feeling and the vibe that I get is it's going to try and be the anti-News Talk ZB, which for people who are listening internationally is kind of our right-wing talk radio station. And I don't know the inner workings of the place. I mean, some of this might be conjecture and rumor, but I've talked to several people within the media work circle, and I know that the advert of people from different tribes and finding their similarities is part of the, I don't know, what do they call it when you do like a board and you put patches of different material on that thing?
Like a vision board.
Vision board. That's part of their vision board for the marketing for what the station is going to be. And it will be fascinating to see if it works, or if people go, no, I want to stay in my tribe. Because at the moment, media is tribalizing people and putting them in their pockets. And then we spoke to a neurologist just last week on the podcast talking about the news and the media has started supplying information to a group that they want, as opposed to something else. And this is not looking at being that. The next question is it going to work? I mean, is this really just going to be Radio New Zealand with adverts? And if it is, would people rather listen to Radio New Zealand? I guess we don't know that answer yet, but yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see, can this radio station draw together people from different tribes, but who have some same similarities. People look up that advert. It's Danish TV, TV2, you'll find it. They ask, who's had sex this week and who's feeling lonely and who's bisexual. And then you see all these people coming out from different groups and being a group themselves. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that they have that as a value, because it does seem that the best way to kind of to build some sort of group, or is to kind of find similar people, and that does work on some level, but you need to have a value, that really drives you if you're going to try and do something like that, I think. Yeah. And I guess going back to comedy, what I like, some people ask what's the role of comedy in society? And I mean, it's kind of like, what's the role of music? It's a very diverse thing. Some comedy can definitely divide people, but comedy also has the great ability to bring people together. And what I would hope, what I do like about gigs is you do walk around, you do come in, people, hopefully from all different walks of life, different ages and stages, and you can find a similarity, and you've all laughed together, and you've all had this shared experience, which is an amazing thing. I think, I love it when you watch a comedian that you go, oh wow, I'm thinking the same thing, or I can't believe he's, I'm kind of an observational comedian, and so when you kind of tap into those things that people are like, yeah, me too. And then you have this whole room of people laughing at something, and they're going, oh, wow. And we have all this in common. And it's a magic moment, really.
Do you think in comedy, because I'm thinking about the comedian sitting in the green room may look like a weird group. What about the audience? I mean, I wonder if the audience, if they're primarily there just to laugh, then you could have that, separate parts of society all coming together. Or, I mean, as you say, you're kind of getting back into it now. Do you find more a kinship amongst the audience because the thing they have in common is the comedian? So you're not going to get a broad various tribes coming and saying, person X because their comedy is actually tailored to a tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, comedy can be tribal in that way. I think the shows that I'm doing and that this show that we're producing kind of, a lot of like in people in Whanganui, let's say, are just going to come out to see comedy, I think, and to see a comedy show. So they might not be as tribalized. But if you have bigger names coming, and you do see that, like you do see it racially, definitely, people will tap into that, and they'll have their audiences. Yeah.
Probably also depends on the comedian, isn't it? I mean, I'm just thinking about who it would be. I mean, anyone's going to go see Di Henwood because he's like New Zealand's uncle or New Zealand's father or New Zealand's brother, depending on the age that you are. But there's a guy coming from Australia, a comedian. His surname's Butsman. He's got a beard. He's quite controversial. He's a very successful YouTuber as well, and he's very much, I'm going to slam the woke community and stuff. So I imagine his audience would be far less diverse. Not diverse meaning culturally, but just
is he playing Wellington, or is he giving that a miss?
I can't remember. I'll have to go and have a squiz. I have to go. I mean, the reason I know about these people coming through is because of what I do. I'm like, I wonder if I can get a podcast with that person.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Hey, so tell me now as well. You just mentioned Wellington, and the first thing that came to mind for me was Wellington, of course, the protests going on. How's life in Whanganui with all the COVID stuff and with all the pushback at the moment from many in the community about what we do and don't want our government to be doing? Not quite understanding that democracy goes, we elect a body to make the decisions, and then a certain amount of time later, we go, happy with your decisions, we'll keep you in, or we go, yeah, no, you can piss off now. People don't seem to quite get that. I had that on a Facebook page down here in Dunnigan. There's quite a big one that a lot of the Dunnigan people get on it. It's like, how can the local mayor think they've got the right to? And the response to them is because they were elected. That's sort of how it works. We kind of go, you are now in charge. So how's it going?
We're going okay. Listen, I'm not a big political comedian, so don't try to suck me into that. But I think I do a bit about the protests. But one of the things that's funny is when people go like, we live in a democracy, so there's like, whatever, a couple hundred, a couple thousand, even a couple thousand people in, we're in democracy, so do what we want. I'm like, that's not the way it works, and you're actually not the majority, even if you wanted it that way. But there definitely is some pushback. We have been one of the lowest vaccinated communities, but we're starting to get up there as well. So yeah.
And I'm not going to now suggest something that I'm thinking this is comedy per se, but I do love Twitter, and I do love the light-hearted banter. Can we put it that way? That happens around Twitter, and following this Wellington protest has been fascinating on Twitter. I enjoy. This is one that I put out yesterday. I don't know if you noticed, but they had a whole bunch of hay turn up because the ground was so wet. So my tweet, and if you want to follow me, it's @PatBritton, was what was it the protesters were saying about sheep? Hay on the ground. So
my one, which I posted in my I've got a little comedian friend group of guys in Whanganui. I posted is of course all the rain came, and I said, it looks like now God is turning the sprinklers on the protests.
Now, the reason that I connected with you originally was you are someone who has done comedy, who's been in that world, but also in currently you're starting up sort of a new business initiative. And I thought this is really interesting because I love comedy. I love talking comedy, but also we're being told that the unsuccessful nature of businesses at the moment in a pandemic, everything's shutting down. All the small businesses are closing all over the country. And in that moment in Whanganui, you have started up a comedy club. And I just thought this is a really interesting little thing to check out. I don't mean little, not patronizing, but I mean, the story. This this is the story in the Whanganui Chronicle. Unfortunately, we need to be paid to read the whole thing. So
Yeah.
you can flesh it out for us. A new year, new laughs. Hello Comedy Club set to launch in Whanganui, and the club is called Hello Comedy.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've already mentioned the classic. The classic is known, I guess, amongst comedy circles. I don't know if it's the only dedicated comedy club in New Zealand. I think it might be, and it's based in Queen Street in Auckland. And it used to be in Auckland where they showed porn. When I was a teenager, that was the porno movie theater. Sorry, I should say that again. That was the porno movie theater. I hear.
Yeah.
But you've decided in a pandemic, even though let's say it's turning toward the endemic and we're getting to the end of it, to start a business and to bring comedy to Whanganui. And am I right in understanding not just like starting a business and then using bars and stuff, but you actually have a location, like a permanent location for this that we're looking at right now? Is that the building?
No, it's not a permanent location. Actually, that headline was a little bit misleading. A comedy club as such. We are starting a comedy production company.
Okay.
And so that is a club which is actually owned by the Whanganui Musicians Club.
Yep.
And they have a monthly gig there, and they bring in others. So we're using that venue at the moment. But we are definitely starting a comedy production company in Whanganui.
Does that mean that you're more starting a comedy business? So when we look at what you've got coming up, and let's just bring this back in here. Like this week, you're starting off with a friend of the show, Nick Rado.
Yes.
You're basically the producers of it, and you're using that location rather than that location being your quote unquote club.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we my friend Elizabeth McMenamin and I, she's a actress and producer and lived in Auckland for a while and is now back in Whanganui where she grew up, and she's been doing comedy. And we got together because we want to bring more comedy to Whanganui, and we have a lot of contacts and experience. So there's a bit of things happening in Whanganui and the Palmy area already. There actually is a monthly show in Whanganui, which has mainly has semi-professional comedians from Whanganui and Palmy, sometimes Wellington, Palmerston North, New Plymouth. And what we're really looking to do is to do something a little bit bigger on the scale, a bit bigger venue, bigger headlines. And we're really looking to build towards to doing a little comedy festival in Whanganui. That's really kind of our big dream. But again, it's a weird time to start something, and it is kind of humorous as well. Like, let's start a production company in Whanganui in the middle of a global pandemic. But putting
on events where there's restricted numbers and people can't come.
Yeah, totally. And actually, when we started to plan this show, it was kind of October, November last year when we really made the decision. And we were looking at other venues. There's another theater, which is very cool, and we want to use in the future probably, but it's 100 seats, but there's no chance to distance. So I think technically you couldn't go ahead with 100. Whereas, we were at that point in coming out of red and orange. And I thought, we need a venue that can still go ahead if we get snapped back in red. And that was before Omicron, so we didn't even anticipate that, but we did anticipate that we might get down at the 100 limit. So we can do 100 at this venue. We can do 150 if we could, but we can still run it at 100 and distance as well, which is awesome.
What is the does that mean? Because like if I was going along, let's say I took a partner and took a child with me,
Not a child. It's an R18 gig, but
so I had an 18-year-old child.
Yes. Yeah.
And the three of us I'm assuming we can bubble and we can all sit together, but then there needs to be two meters in all directions. So is there a way when you're a promoter now of going, we can have 100 individuals, which means actually if everyone brings a partner, we can have 200 because they can all bubble? Does it how do you work that out?
I think Yeah, it's a little bit confusing, but my understanding is that you make the venue your capacity based on if everyone could social distance at 1 meter, so that'll give you your capacity, so even some of these other little shows that we're doing in other places, not that we're producing but I'm performing in, they can't have 100 because there's no limit. So I think you need to give them the ability to social distance, but then I think technically the highest level of the law would be that everybody is seated in bubbles with at least 1 meter distance. So what we will do is we'll set up little tables and everyone will be seated, and there'll probably be tables of 6, and you'll hopefully mix with those. But those people that want to only sit with those people that they've come with will have the ability to do that. Yeah.
The table of 6, and I'm just asking this now because I'm interested in how it will work. The table of 6 might be 3 couples from different places, so will they be within that 1 meter bubble, or within that table of 6? Can they still be 1 meter apart?
They'll probably be within that bubble, I think. And then
that's okay. That's like I don't know what the guidelines are. So I guess what I'm asking, that works in the guideline.
I think so? I think so. But yeah, I mean, technically, I don't think anyone's going to come in and bust us, but we do want to be, I've been in other I've been in other bars where these laws should be enforced or encouraged, and they're really not. What kind of when you sit down, you're able to take off your mask. When you have a drink in your hand, you're able to. That's another thing. If you have a drink in your hand, so if everyone's walking around with a drink, they don't have a mask on. Technically, I don't think. But yeah, we're going to try and set it up in a way where you kind of are in a little bubble. So that might be with a few other people that you didn't come with. But then when you get up, you put on a mask, you move around, and you encourage people to distance. But yeah, I think comedy's potentially, because I don't know, I think we're going to be in this 100 limit for a while, and I think comedy's in a good spot because other bigger events can't go ahead, big music concerts or big festivals, but there's a lot of comedy shows that can still go ahead at 100 people or less.
It does show. Look, and I'm to be honest with you, I was talking to someone yesterday about this Wellington protest and about the mandates, and I had to actually kind of stop and go, what are they talking about again? Because it's such a generic term, the mandates, because in my opinion, what's happening in Wellington, and you don't need to comment on this, is actually just an anti-vaccine demonstration. It's not an anti-mandate demonstration, because there are lots of people who are fully vaccinated, who wear masks everywhere, who still think the mandate shouldn't be happening because it's time to move on. Whereas at that protest, you do not see masks. Now, if it was purely an anti-mandate vaccine, there'd be maybe not the majority, but there'd be 20, 30% mask wearers saying, I've got the vaccine, but I support the idea of no mandate. So that's my honest held belief, as we have to say in libel laws, why that is potentially just an anti-vaccine march as opposed to an anti-mandate. It's actually hidden. It's couched in an anti-mandate mask. But I had to kind of figure out what that all was again. And it's, as I understand, it's about the people losing their jobs who aren't jabbed. And, you've got idiots like Michael Laws still using the apartheid example on his Facebook page, and it's like he has to be educated again. In apartheid South Africa, they couldn't just take their skin off one day and choose to be. It's not. Anyway. The thing that's fascinating is you're talking about the. So what I'm saying is I think there's a bunch of lunacy going on there. But in saying that, I can also see all the lunacy from the other side. Where, for example, I went to the barbers the other day. You haven't commented yet, but that's all right. I don't mind. They've been looking good. Went to the barbers the other day, and I got a little glass bottle of Pepsi Max that I had while I was waiting, and there was a bit left over. So when I got up from my chair, I still had the sort of Pepsi Max bottle to my lips. So I didn't have to put my mask back on. Obviously, I'd take my mask off to get cut. Didn't have to put my mask back on. Walked to the table, had it in my hand. Didn't have to put my mask back on. All the people around me were masked. Walked out the door. Didn't put my mask back on because I was drinking from a bottle. That's ridiculous. That's lunacy. That's if I can do that, then if I had Omicron, I'm giving it to everybody there. So I can also see, like, that's what I think sometimes about this conversation is the best examples aren't what they're arguing for. Like, I had a teacher on who wouldn't get vaccinated, so she lost her job. And the best argument for that was, Why do I have to be vaccinated at the front of the class when none of my students have to be? But she didn't use that argument. She used all the anti-vaxxer arguments. And it seems to me that there are a bunch of good arguments that could be used to push back, but not even the people who are trying to push back are using the good arguments. So anyway, that was more of a side point. I know that's not your world. I mean, it's not your world, but I guess you got to have an understanding.
Totally. Yeah. My one joke about it, and to be honest, I wrote this joke months ago, and I did it down in Wellington, and it was on some of the smaller protests that came. But my joke is just like, I'm all for a protest, but let's just get the team together beforehand and figure out what we're protesting for. And because you're anti-mandate, you're anti-vaccine, and I saw a guy with a sign and it just said Trump 2020. And I'm like, this guy, he's not even in the wrong country. He's in the wrong year. And so for me, I'm not making a huge political statement, but I think I like to kind of break that tension a little bit. Like that's probably what I want my comedy to be about now, is to kind of, there's tension, and I'm not going to preach at you. And there are comedians that their style is preaching, and that's great. And that's cool. Mine is more observational, high energy. My kind of thing is at the moment is I want to just break the tension. There's a lot of tension in my own life around, parenting, my relationships, my health issues, which to be honest, I don't really talk about much in my comedy, which I'd like to in the future, but I'm just not there yet. But then this thing is floating around. And so like when I'm on stage this weekend or whatever, I'm not going to try and convince you either way, but I want to come in a joke and just break that tension, that we can kind of laugh at it a little bit. Yeah.
Is it offensive to ask a comedian who you like? Because
yeah,
because some comedian like if I don't want to say this, but someone says it on my on my iTunes page, right? And I get compared stylistically, let's just say, to a couple of two in particular American podcasters, one who's quite controversial, but it's more about the style of how we just talk. Like even in this conversation, we're going off on 7 tangents, and then just talk about whatever. So I don't care people saying, because what I get from that is if someone's talking about this product that I make, this content, they can go, oh, if you like Mark Maron, let's give myself a big pat on the back there. You'll probably like at least the style of how he does it. You may not like the content, but you like the style of how he does it. And I hear about you, like I hear about, you say you're observational, and it makes me think of other comedians and they're being observational. If someone came to you in the street and they were like, who are you like? Like that, if they were thinking, am I going to enjoy this comedy on Friday night, seeing Dave? First, is it insulting to ask you that question because, I'm like Dave Wiggins, come on, guys.
Yeah.
I want to get a gist of what you're about. Like, I mean, I always think about those kind of, set up punchline. That's a Jimmy Carr thing, and lots of puns, that's a Jimmy Carr thing. But I think about long stories, and I think about, even the Chappelles or the Chris Rocks or the, on some levels, the Jerry Seinfelds and these sorts of people who are more storytellers. So that's a very long-winded way of kind of saying, if you were to explain to someone your style of comedy and who you like, if they're not offensive, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, there definitely are styles of comedy. I would describe myself as energetic observational comedy. I call myself clean, although I do have one bit. I did comedy professionally for 8 years and I never swore. And wow. I now have one bit where I say the F-bomb because it's about how my son said it. So in the routine, it's actually about my son saying it, which I don't know if that's better or worse. But anyways, I would, yeah, I think it's fine to say some people are like, you're like something, but also, yeah, I am like myself. And to be honest, I'm probably trying to rediscover my style. I'm probably a little bit more storytelling, but still gags. I'm probably similar to Seinfeld, probably a bit more energetic. Yeah, but you definitely gotta. Seinfeld talks about every comedian has to go on their own journey to discover. So when I started out, I listened to a lot of Seinfeld and Brian Regan and others. I would even write bits where I sounded like Seinfeld, but over years, I mean, I'm talking years and years and years, I actually became I'm more energetic now, which is kind of ironic because I still struggle with fatigue, but on stage for, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour at a time, I could be energetic. I'm probably more energetic now, but that's been something that's developed over years and kind of just slowly kind of emerged really as I performed more. Yeah.
I just put in, as we were talking, energetic observational comedian. Have you ever Googled that term?
Oh, no.
I'll show you what comes up on the images.
Okay. All right. You tell me who I'm like. Yeah.
Oh, you look.
Oh, well, there you go. There's me 15 years ago and me currently now. Yeah.
So the algorithms would tend to agree.
Yeah.
The algorithms, the lords that we have to look after. So let's talk about what's coming up this week. We put this up before. Let's put it up again for people who are watching. Now, is this officially the first gig for Hello Comedy?
Yeah, officially the first gig. Yeah.
So talk about it.
Yeah. So my friend Liz and I just got together and we really wanted to bring something. We kind of thought, where's the gap in the market in Whanganui? So we've got this, as I said earlier, we've got this show, which is produced by DIY Comedy. And that's a monthly show and it's great. It's a $15, $20 show. And it really hits it for what it is. But we wanted to bring something a little bit bigger and build towards something a little bit bigger, which means bringing outside headliners, but also incorporating locals who we think are at the top level of the local scene. So that's what we're doing. We rented a venue, we created a brand, we're doing promo, and we're hoping to really build an audience that wants to come to this show. So at the moment, this show will be every 3 months. We might produce other comedians who are coming through. We're also looking at trying to get an open mic, which is a little bit different. And that's in terms of really trying to get local comedians, more experience, which will feed into some of these bigger things we want to do. But yeah, our dream is really to have a little comedy festival in Whanganui where we have a weekend and we bring in outside acts who are doing, shows in the comedy festival in Wellington and Auckland and other places. And mixing in with, again, local acts as well, and kind of hitting those two sort of levels. We're also running a workshop with Nick Rado on emceeing, which is again part of that vision of trying to upskill local comedians as well. Yeah.
I was just thinking as you were talking about the idea of the festivals, you could piggyback off the International Comedy Festival and just have the guys who are flying from Auckland to Wellington just divert. On the way down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking to do that potentially. But also, what happens as well is those guys hone their shows for the comedy festival, and so potentially we're looking at a winter date for our festival. I think winter is just a great time for comedy. It's also a time in Whanganui where there's not as much happening. That's kind of what we're hearing. There's normally a lot of things happening in the summer. They've been canceled this summer, which is unfortunate. But in some sense, we were piggybacking off that comedy festival where we can say to a comedian, hey, you've got an hour-long solo show, which you did at the comedy festival, and we saw it and it was great, or it won an award. Why don't you come and do that in Whanganui? And I mean, when I was doing, I've done 4 solo shows at the comedy festival, nominated for the Billy T in 2009, and that's what it was. You develop that show, and then you go to you go to another festival. You go, I got this show. Here's the photo. Here's the bio. Here's the whole show. I can come and do it. So yeah, that's really what we're hoping.
People want to find out more about, I mean, if they watch this in this week, this is the week of the 14th of February that we're having this podcast this Friday as we record this, is that first gig. If people want to find out more about the gig, is it best to go to your? Well, you've got as we said before, you've got a Facebook page.
Yeah, Facebook. We're on Instagram as well. Liz runs our Instagram. She's a bit more savvy. She's younger than me, so she knows all these things. Yeah, and I mean, and even if you're listening to it after that, you know, I don't know. Do you like us or do you follow us? I don't really know. Either way.
Do you think that the Facebook place is the best place to get updated information for what's happening in May, August, June, whatever later on this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are in the Whanganui area or want to travel to the Whanganui area to see comedy, then that's where you'll find it. You know.
It's really exciting, Dave. And I mean, is this ultimately sort of the full-time job desire? Like this what you want to be doing permanently? Is that even a possibility, or is this always going to be sort of a thing on the side hustle?
I think it's going to be a little bit of a side hustle. I mean, anyone in New Zealand, there's nobody really doing just stand up, you know, full time. Everyone's got some comedy adjacent work. You know, they're writing for TV, they're doing a little bit of acting. So even when I was in the height of kind of doing stand up, I did have another part-time job because I only really did live stand-up. There was little comedy writing jobs at that point as well, but you know, I had other friends that they were doing acting, they were doing ads, or you know, whatever to supplement, which was cool. But I just decided I just wanted to do stand-up. So at this point, living in Whanganui, it's looking to grow towards a part-time thing where I'm performing, where I'm helping producing. And just and I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Very cool. So Hello Comedy on Facebook, also Hello Comedy on Instagram as well. And if you're looking for, because you know sometimes there's several things of the same name. That's the logo there, the little alien dude.
Yeah. So that's actually drawn by good friend, local artist Mike Marsh, who is now doing comedy. He did comedy, his first open mic, which was really, really fun. We've got this cool little community. There we go. There's Mike's stuff. Yeah. So Mike's a friend of Hello Comedy and myself. And we've just created this little, and I hope it grows, this little community that's quite into comedy, quite into watching comedy. And it's a fun little time to be in Whanganui. It's a cool little city.
Yeah, I agree. It is a cool little city, and I remember being in that neck of the woods, being Whanganui, also sort of Palmerston North. Those areas, they've got some cool. I mean, I came from Auckland to Dunedin, and although Dunedin is sort of, well, at one stage was considered one of the big four. I think Hamilton's now bigger, and Tauranga is about the same. But you find some smaller places around New Zealand, and they have a lot going for them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really cool little art scene happening here, and comedy, to my knowledge, hasn't really been a part of it, but it's starting to become a part of it. And there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people relocating here that want to come out and see something. And that's one of the reasons as well that we really started this, because a lot of comedy tours will go to New Plymouth, and then they'll skip over to Palmy, and then they'll go down to Wellington. And a lot of times Whanganui gets missed out. Now, you know, maybe for good reason, we might find out. It's always harder, to market things in a smaller place. But we're also local, and we're learning all the tricks and the trades of being able to get the word out locally. So if we got people on the ground, we can definitely make these shows work, which is really exciting.
It is also good to build that grassroots up. I mean, there's quite a strong comedy culture here in Dunedin, and there is, 8 or 10 Dunedin-based comedians performing every week, getting in front of people, doing those things. And I know there's a similar thing in Christchurch, probably as big a size. I've spoken to a couple of comedians from Christchurch as well. And then that grows a local scene, that grows an audience, and then the bigger artists have a place to come and grow it further, because there's been an audience created for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's kind of a chicken and an egg sort of thing too. Going back to what I said, you need to get on stage to get good as a comedian. So we got a lot of local people, and we need to be getting them shows. but they need to also be good shows to start to build an audience. But then you only get good by doing shows, you know. So if we get the ball rolling, it just gets bigger and bigger. It snowballs, you know. It's awesome, and that's the big thing. I mean, 10 years ago, when I started 20 years ago, I mean, there was nothing anywhere else other than Auckland, really. And now, and even 11 years ago, 10 years ago, when I stopped, it was still much smaller. And now we're looking. I mean, we've got a monthly show, and we've got now a 3 monthly big headline show, and we're looking to start an open mic, you know, in Whanganui. And like 10, 20 years ago, that just wasn't even close to being a reality.
Yeah, amazing. Hey, Dave Wiggins, thanks so much for joining us today. Hello Comedy is the Facebook page, best way to find out more about what's going on in Whanganui. But also, I don't know, if you're a comedian and you want to, if you want to, you know, spend some time in Whanganui and see what's going on there, Hello Comedy is a good place for you to check out as well. Thank you, sir. It's been a lovely time to catch up with you again after all these years. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on and sharing your exciting news, and absolutely the best of luck. I mean, anyone who's starting up a business in this culture and climate, I guess, whatever the business is, I wish you nothing but positive vibes and the best of luck with it. And I hope the people are going to come out and support you and what you guys are doing, because I guess it's much like anything. If they support it and they like it and they patron it, then they'll get more of it, which will be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you got to start somewhere. And the thing is, it might sound like a bad time to start it, but if we can start it now and we can get it going now, then when things, you know, do change and hopefully, you know, improve in terms of, you know, limits and people definitely wanting to come out and not worried, then I mean, it's only going to go up from here, really.
Absolutely. Dave Wiggins, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me.